Hi everyone. I am here with Bec Faye, marketplace optimization and growth specialist, who is running the marketplace playbook.com. Bec, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, really great to be here. So yeah, basically, as you explained, I specialize in helping marketplaces to really optimize for growth, and spend a lot of time kind of from the UX kind of angle and looking at conversion optimization. But in amongst that, I work with a lot of different marketplaces of all different shapes, and sizes and stages. So yeah, really looking forward to today, and having a bit of a chat.
Yeah, it's really exciting to have you on. And if you haven't seen before, but me and Bec did a webinar as well together around UX design for online marketplaces, which was really valuable. So I'm super happy to have you on board for this interview as well around monetization.
Yeah, really great to be back.
Yeah, awesome. Let's jump straight into it, because that's why you all came here for anyways. So if we think about monetization strategies for marketplaces, what are sort of, like, there's so many things that you need to consider, but if we can just start with what is monetization for marketplaces really? Like, how would you define monetization?
Um, Look, I think I have a couple of thoughts on monetization. I think part of it is obviously how we actually make money from a marketplace. How do we actually create this piece of technology that's going to fulfill its purpose, but in a way that we can actually help us sustain it as a business, or a not-for-profit, or whatever shape it happens to be in. Um, but I also think it's an interesting area that I think we tend to really focus in on specific trends and the way that we always do monetization in marketplaces. But I think it's actually really quite interesting because we see a lot of trends in people going for funding and raising all capital and everything like that, and your marketplace is very much dependent on that. But one of the things I'm really passionate about exploring over the next few years is really trying to figure out how can we make marketplaces profitable, without necessarily relying on investment quite so much. So it's one of my areas of that I'm quite passionate about. So, but I think in a nutshell, monetization is really about, all right, how do we actually make money? How do we make sure that we're making something that's worthwhile, that can be sustainable?
Yeah, and like if you're a young marketplace as well, like getting the investors on board, there needs to be some plan on how they can make their money back. And if you can't monetize your platform in the right way, then the investments are not going to happen, even to begin with. So yeah, so for online marketplaces, if you look at different monetization strategies to implement, there's so many different alternative business models out there, like commission-based, selling fees, advertisement, subscription, whatever, different alternatives. But what would you say, Bec, is important to consider when deciding on a suitable monetization strategy?
Yeah, look, a really good question. I think for me, it always comes back to, no matter what stage you're at in your marketplace, really understanding the value, basically your core user group, the value that you're offering to that user group, what pain points are solving for them, what need we're providing for them, and then really starting to really distill the value that we're offering, and that way basing our monetization around the value that we're offering. So it's going to make our job a lot easier to justify, and it's also going to mean that people are willing to pay for that. Obviously, it depends on what side of the market we end up charging and the different structures that we might end up charging. But for me, it always comes back to yeah, really ensuring that we're providing that value and kind of associating the monetization around that typically. And one of the exercises I get a lot of early stage marketplaces to do, to really prove that their marketplace monetization could really work, is trying to create 5 transactions successfully without actually using the marketplace as a platform. So to do it manually offsite, if they can create those 5 transactions manually, that excuse me, to excuse me. I've got a bit of a cough today, and I'm struggling a little bit. Yeah, as I was saying, yeah, really, if you can prove that you can create these transactions without technology, it means and prove that people are willing to pay at that point in time, you get a lot of really valuable lessons along that journey. It allows you to iterate on that monetization strategy without having to impede on the marketplace as a whole or worrying about technology and things like that. But it's obviously for early stage marketplaces. But for the later stage marketplaces, I think it's really a matter of trying to figure out why they're looking at their monetization strategies. Is it that they're looking to add a new revenue stream to their business? And if that's the case, then again, it's going back to who are our core users, what value can we offer them, and is there an additional way that we can add revenue to our business in that way? I think we touched on it in the webinar about monetization, around how tricky it can be to actually to transform an established marketplace and change that monetization strategy. But if you can find ways to add new revenue streams into the business, that could be a way of kind of exploring that.
Yeah, no, you're right. In the recent webinar that we did around marketplace monetization as well, we spoke about the mature marketplaces and really, well-established global players, on how it can be very difficult to change that business model, and instead looking at maybe becoming more of an investor and adding revenue streams that way as well. Just out of curiosity, like regions and geographies, does that really matter when you look into integrating a new strategy?
I think it always does, because different regions are always going to have different intricacies about them, whether it's the currency, whether it's the exchange rate, whether it's the culture and the way that that different aspects are conceived in that particular culture, for example. So I think it definitely comes into play. So that's where really getting to know your users that are using your platform every day, really understanding what it is that drives them, what they're comfortable with, and where they would see the value in your platform.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. You should always look at user behavior. What is the user base that what's your marketplace? Who's the target audience? Who is using your platform? How are they using it? And look into those different aspects, and then you'll find different opportunities. I think the premium listings, like that kind of monetization strategies, really comes from that need of people want to be able to sponsor content, etc., and these kind of things.
Exactly. I'm a true believer in that your end users are going to tell you what you need to be doing in business. If you're not listening to them, you're making a whole heap of assumptions. Everything I always say with anybody I work with is always getting back to, all right, who are your users, and listening to them, because they're going to tell you the answers.
Yeah, super. So if we look at monetization, and it really kind of feels like things are trending from year to year. There's a constant development, and the more marketplaces, the marketplaces industry develop, moving from classifieds to offering more the full payment solution and the entire offering. So my question is really like, what is the kind of trending monetization strategies that works in 2019?
I think, as you just touched on then, like one of the big trends that we're really seeing is particularly the larger marketplaces that are in those traditional classified spaces, trying to get closer and closer to that transaction. In the original days of the online classifieds, it was very much a listing, and then a lot of that transaction happened off technology. Basically, it all happened in the real world. Where now, yeah, they're really, again, going back to that customer journey, really understanding what is that need that they're solving for their users, for their customers. For example, in the place of real estate, they're looking at, all right, the original classifieds might be just selling a house, but actually, if we take a step back from that, there's a whole heap of stuff that happens in amongst that. There's things like they need to get financing. There's the getting phone and internet and all of those kind of things connected, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that needs to kind of happen around that part of the journey of that customer's life. So really looking at what that journey looks like, and then starting to figure out where they can add more value in, again, adding new revenue streams into that. And that's something that we're seeing time and time again. Airbnb for Work's another good example as well, where Airbnb saw a trend happening with the types of users that were using their marketplaces, using the platform. They realized that there was a lot of people using it for work. So then they started to explore that, and then Airbnb for Work was born, and there's another income stream for them. So for me, it's really that everybody is coming back to this journey and really starting to depict, all right, how else can we get more closer to the transaction, but how can we add more value as well in amongst that journey?
Yeah, no, it's really key, you know, that like for mainly like larger mature players, to really have that opportunity to both satisfy their users and users by adding these value sort of services. It could be anything from, you know, whatever insurances or delivery and payment solutions, but you offer that complete solution, and that also gives not just increased UX, but also actually more revenue streams for yourself. So
Exactly.
it's a win-win in that sense to move in that directions, I believe.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yep.
out of
Exactly.
out of curiosity, are there any, you know, traditional monetization strategies that doesn't seem to work anymore, or are kind of fading out?
One of the things that probably less than the fading out, but one of the challenges that I've seen marketplaces really struggle with is, particularly in the early stage. I work with a lot of early stage marketplaces. A lot of them are falling down the tunnel of they're in a low frequency marketplace and they're in a low value frequency marketplace, which basically means transactions are only happening very very rarely for a user. So for example, one user might only transact with their platform maybe once a year or once every 6 months. And it's only a very low value. So if they're taking a click of the ticket, a percentage of the transaction, they really need a huge scale in order for that to work. And because they're so close to the business, sometimes it can be a little bit hard to see the fact that they are charging that percentage, but yet the lifetime value of that customer and the average order value of that customer is so low. It's just a really, really challenging space to be in, and at scale is really the only option. So this is where I think that they really need to kind of recognize that that's the case, and if they can't shift that around and focus on solving a need that's around that might actually bring in a higher frequency from that particular customer, or a higher value of that transaction. It's a matter of kind of looking to see what other income streams that can they look at, what other revenue streams can they look at, and yeah, and I think just being mindful of that, is something definitely to be considered.
Yeah, that's super. And then you touched on a little bit here that you work with a lot of more younger or early stage marketplaces. So I'm gonna jump into to another question, but feeding off of that, I assume since you speak to a lot of young early stage companies, marketplaces, that you have encountered a couple of really disruptive sort of out of the box thinking style monetization strategies. Anything that you want to share?
Yeah, well, I guess one of the real great things about working with early stage marketplaces is that we can be really inventive and really creative in how we approach monetization. I was working with a client recently who was in a space where they were very concerned about the fact that they were kind of in the business of matchmaking almost. So they had users that were coming in from one side, on the demand side, but it was very easy for them to form relationships with the supplier, and therefore that relationship could be technically taken off the platform. Therefore, charging a commission, for example, wasn't going to work for them. So we need to really take a step back and just really understand, again, what the customer journey was like, but really looking at the big picture of what the user was trying to achieve in their particular industry. And by taking that step back, we're able to identify that there was actually a bigger need that needed solving, which meant that we could actually really structure, instead of being kind of narrowed in by what was done previously, we're able to create more of a disruptive, model that would allow that particular marketplace to then basically they 10 times the amount, 10 times the revenue that they were then earning from an average order value from that particular customer that was coming through the platform. And then we're looking at a new way now to, which will work out instead of them buying basically for a single hour, for example, they will be now purchasing bulk hours. And then we're looking into more of a membership type of opportunity, which will come down the track as well. So suddenly we've gone from being worried about the supply and the demand going off-site and off-platform where we're losing the transaction to it now actually really increasing and multiplying that revenue stream now for that particular marketplace. So it's kind of combining quite a few different techniques together. But by really understanding what the needs were of that user group, we're able to identify this new opportunity that would mean that we're basically solving the problem from all angles. So that's been really interesting. That's an experiment we're still running with, but so far the tests have been really, really positive.
It's really cool. I know like there can be a big struggle, you know, with having conversions, like losing out on the actual conversion from your marketplace. That you have your buyers or sellers, especially the sellers, I would assume, who are incentivized to leave the marketplace. But here is also like from a moderation standpoint, that's where it gets dangerous for the user as well, because you can't control the conversation. You don't know, you can't protect your user, the buyer in that scenario. So if the seller manages to get the conversation off the site, then the chance for a scam, etc., increases significantly. So it's also like a way to, you know, protect your users in that sense as well, to be able to keep them on your platform. So it's very interesting. Another way of preventing that as well is kind of adding, like we spoke about value-added services as monetization strategy. And if you add enough value, like open table or like an Uber, something like that, where you actually can do reservations and book, and the platform itself is so useful for the seller that can bring down the incentive to actually leave the platform, because it adds services that you need.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a really great technique.
Yeah, a good example. So I think that brings us to the end of today's interview. So thank you so much, Bec, for taking your time, even though you have a little bit of cough, but there's no problem.
Yeah, voice is disappearing on me.
Yeah, it's been really helpful, and I hope and I think all the listeners are really happy to hear your tips and tricks and ideas for monetization strategies. So if you want to get in touch with Bec, you can reach her on her email on bec@becfaye.com. And if you want to learn more about monetization strategies, check out our webinar that we did on September 17th. And finally, if you want to learn more about content moderation and how we at Becero can help you improve your content quality, and from that side of things, boost your revenue generation, then don't hesitate to reach out to me at emil.andersson@becero.com. So thank you, Bec.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.